Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street partners with businesses, organisations and unions and social democratic parties across Australia and the globe to train leaders, develop engagement strategies and empower people to organise for change. And in 2021, which is coming soon, Dunn Street will continue to work with folks that want to make a difference, inspire, give hope and enable leadership to achieve their shared purpose. To find out how you can partner with Dunn Street, hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second to last episode of Socially Democratic for 2020, your weekly centre-left political and cultural podcast that dives into the progressive issues of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. On this week, we are going to do a federal review, like a 2020 wrap-up of federal politics. And to help me do that, I'm inviting onto today's episode two of my good friends, the Labor member for Macnamara, down here in Melbourne's inner southeast, Josh Burns, and the Labor member for Lilley up in Brisbane, Anika Wells. And the two of those guys, Josh and Anika, will come on today to unpack the year that was 2020, which isn't actually an easy task, but we will make a bit of a go of it. And don't forget to subscribe to Socially Democratic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon or Stitcher and or your favourite podcast app. And if you are listening to it on Apple Podcast right now, leave us a rating and give us a review. That would be greatly appreciated before the year is out. And for updates on all the latest episodes, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. Okay, let's get to today's episode. We're taping this one on a Friday morning in free Melbourne, and we are coming towards the end of the year. And as we did last year, we are going to do a yearly review. But last year we just did one with Harriet Shing, who's a state Labor member in Victoria. What we decided to do this year differently is we're going to do a federal one and a state one. So next week will be our Victorian state wrap up with Harriet Shing, the member for Eastern Region. But today we're going to do a federal wrap-up, and I'm very pleased to be joined by two good friends of the podcast. Returning again, the Labor member for Lilley, Anika Wells. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Good to be with you.
And the Labor member for Macnamara, but will always be Melbourne Ports to me, Josh Burns. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Team, it is a real pleasure to be with you this morning.
So it's interesting to get both of you back on the show because you were elected first-time MPs at the 2019 election. You're the class of 2019. And I had to remind myself that 2019 was only last year, but it literally feels like a decade ago.
Yeah.
So this has been your first full year as members of Parliament. So I want you to reflect, if we possibly can, to start with by reflecting on this first year, first full year in Parliament. And how would you describe 2020 to your children when they turn 21? And I'll start with you, Anika, because you have a lot more children than you did when we last spoke.
Yes, that's true. I certainly didn't start 2020 expecting to end it with 3 children under 4, and probably we could talk about defining moments, but that was one of them. But in terms of the year, full year as an MP and how we'll describe it, for the true political hacks out there, remember when Christopher Pyne gave his valedictory speech in the Parliament and he said, I never really had a log cabin story like the rest of you. The hardest time my life ever, it went downhill for me was when I had to fetch my own lemon for my gin and tonic. I think this has been the year of the log cabin story. And if you didn't have a story of hardship before 2020, you have one now. So this is the equivalent when we talk to our children in decades to come. when our grandparents said, I used to walk 16 kilometres in the snow in barefoot to get to school. You've got no idea what suffering is. This year has given us those stories for decades to come.
It really has, actually. That's a good point. And you're saying that as a Queenslander. You technically never even had coronavirus up there.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Queen Palaszczuk was the first to declare a state of emergency back in January. I think she did it 27th of January. But it was still, we've still got the effects economically, if not what Victoria had, which I am sure we will cover in some depth. It has affected everybody just in different ways. And I think the other thing politically that 2020 gave us was, particularly after our loss in 2019 and lots of soul searching that the party was doing, gave us some excellent reinforcement on the power of the collective, didn't it? Because we had to act as a collective in order to get ourselves out of coronavirus lockdowns, and also the power of Labor principles, isn't it? Liberals have always stood for smaller government and for keeping government out of people's lives, and government has had to be in every element of our lives this year just to keep us all afloat. And who would ever have thought that we would have a federal Liberal government introducing a wage subsidy? So on a positive note, I think it has reinforced the importance, the value, the power of our own Labor principles, which is a good thing.
Through gritted teeth, they announced that wage subsidy. Josh Burns, reflecting on the year for yourself, how would you describe 2020 to your children?
Well, my daughter would have thought this was a blast this year. I think she's had a great year of spending lots of time, and certainly for me to be able to spend time with her, that's been something that I'll never ever forget. To be able to be at home with her, I'd be lying if I didn't say I loved it, and I loved being able to be around more. And as Anika knows, flying to and from Canberra is it's probably the worst part of our job is being away from our families. So in that sense, telling my daughter that I got to spend time with her when she's older, and when I'm an embarrassing older dad, or more embarrassing than I am now. Being able to say that I was able to do that was one of the few things that was amazing about this year. But Anika's point about the log cabin story is a really, really good one. And this year was a year of history, and I don't think many people, especially the sort of millennial and Gen Z and X's and whatever they are, have lived through a historical event like this. And I think one of the big trends that the world was seeing, especially from a political point of view, was this post-truth politics and this idea that these right-wing strongmen can bluster their way through government. And this year has challenged that idea head on. And this pandemic has challenged that idea head on, in that you can't fake your way through managing this. You have to respect science. You have to respect the truth. And if you don't, then you're going to get caught out. And the countries that haven't respected the science, and the countries and the politicians that haven't respected science this year, have been caught out. And this is not the first and last time that leadership was required. And this is not the first and last time that science and respecting this idea of truth and protecting people sincerely needed to be respected. And dare I say it, we've got another big scientific challenge on the horizon, and it'll be a test as to whether we were able to confront it with the same commitment that we've done in Australia and in Victoria as we have this year. So it's been a year of personally spending a lot of time at home and with family, but politically, I also think that it's been a year where through all of that challenge and all of the issues that people have gone through, leadership has mattered. And when leadership hasn't been there, people have really suffered.
Josh Burns, you make a really interesting point there that I actually would want to pick up on before we go to our next question, and that is the compare and contrast of national leaders around the world and how they've handled the pandemic has been distinct, and there'll be outliers out in there, but where we've found centre-left governments that have respected the science, the response has been adequate, right? There's no success stories really here in this pandemic. A lot of people have died, but it's been adequate where we've seen centre-right governments that have rejected science or have questioned the science, then their response has been appalling. Britain being one example, obviously the United States, Brazil being others. And some good examples are obviously New Zealand under the leadership of Labor Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Australia could be argued to be an outlier because we have a right-wing government, but we've had a reasonably good response. But I'd put it to both of you guys. I think that Scott Morrison really was arm twisted into showing leadership by state premiers, in particular state Labor premiers. And you just made a point there before, Anika, about Anastasia Palaszczuk moving decisively in terms of a state of emergency. And so, Anika, I just want to get your thoughts on that. I mean, did Scott Morrison in 2020 subcontract his leadership to other people to get us through this crisis?
Well, only the bits that required work, Stephen. All the PR and credit, I think he kept firmly on his desk. One of the interesting elements of 2020, I think, is the formation of National Cabinet and how, on one hand, it did make for a recalibration of power because the state premiers often, like you said, actually overruled the Prime Minister or insisted things happen where he would have been, like you said, by his very nature, more reticent to act. But also the National Cabinet rendered all of the oppositions, both federal and state, across the nation more irrelevant than we would certainly like to be or that we were elected to be, particularly when you add the cancellation of Parliament months on end. So I think, yes, some things the PM was forced to do against his inclination, but then he did also end up having a really good year. You can't deny that when you look at the numbers in sort of how people are, I guess, in the end grateful to their governments for keeping Australia largely in much better shape than other countries across the world. And when you think about the start of this year, the PM was under real and serious pressure with both his response and, like you say, by his nature, lack of inclination to act quickly on bushfires. He was still living through the Hawaii controversy when we resumed Parliament in the first week of February. And the other thing that was boiling around then was sports frauds, which was the stories just kept coming out of that scandal. The government was under pressure in the Parliament in February about sports frauds, led by friend of the pod, Senator Anthony Chisholm, who runs the Senate committee on that. And then this hit. So you would never have expected. I thought we were starting the year based on what had happened over the summer with the bushfires. We'd be having a climate change year and that we'd be making some ground on actually arguing the science based on what we just experienced. And then here we are at the end of 2020, having faced a very, very different year and struggling to keep climate change on the agenda at all.
Josh, anything to add to that?
The one defining moment I thought, especially in Victoria, on top of what Anika answered, was that press statement that Josh Frydenberg, Greg Hunt and Scott Morrison released when the Victorian government had to make decisions. Some of these decisions were, these are the stuff of nightmares in politics, that you literally don't have two good decisions. You have two really difficult and awful decisions before you. Do you lock down even further, or do you hold restrictions and allow people to do more and potentially let the virus rip? This was at the heart of it, stage 4 lockdown, and what the Prime Minister did was issue a press statement, just commenting on it. We're a bit displeased about it. We're a bit annoyed. We you compare it to New South Wales and we think you should be moving faster. Anika referred to the bushfires when he said, "I don't hold a hose, mate." This was the Prime Minister saying in the middle of a pandemic in Victoria's, one of the most stressful and difficult days as a Victorian that I can ever remember, him saying in a press statement with the two senior Victorian government members, "I don't hold a hose. This is Daniel's problem." Daniel Andrews, the Premier. And I thought, he's still happy to take the call from Joe Biden talking about how good Australia's done. He's still happy to parade around.
Japan.
Let me tell on my on our Zoom catch-ups with Austria about how, let me tell you about how Australia's managed this. Well, in actual fact, when Australia needed management, this guy wrote a press statement talking about the people who were actually managing this pandemic. And I think that tells you a lot about this guy. Obviously, many in the Labor movement, were fired up by the way in which John Howard governed this country, and his willingness to attack people at work and their working rights and circumstances. But I, for the life of me, could never ever see John Howard issuing a press statement in the middle of a national crisis, basically removing all responsibility from the federal government, removing all authority from the federal government, and all consequence from the federal government, and turning the office of the Prime Minister into Australia into a commentary office, in the same way that you would expect it from a commentator in a news outlet. It was the stuff of piss ants, and I think that Scott Morrison, Anika's right, that Scott Morrison, is lucky that he's set up a good process that got good people around a table, but this guy didn't lead us through the national crisis. It was left up to the state premiers, both Labor and Liberal, and that, it's a reflection on him and his standing and his attitude to this caper.
Picking up on that point, Josh, Scott Morrison gives off the shit boss vibes, who takes all the credit for all the hard work that the staff do in front of the visiting dignitaries or whatever. And we're all, in the back slaving away doing, 17-hour days, and he's rocking in at 10:30 in the morning, goes straight and has a coffee, has,
in his golf shorts.
Yeah, a liquid lunch, and pisses off at 3:30 in the afternoon. But then when someone important comes by at the company, he's like, oh, yes, we're doing an excellent job, yada, yada, yada. He just gives off that shit boss, wanker boss vibes that just starts to irritate me. Anika, Josh has just talked about some defining moments of 2020. I want to hear your thoughts on some of the defining moments of this year.
Apart from some of the coronavirus ones touched on by Josh and the bushfires, I think we are recording this on the anniversary of the repeal of Medivac, which took place a year ago today. And I think that was a really tough one for us to be in the chamber for. I remember I was sitting next to Josh at the time, watching these bastards just repeal something that was really important to so many people. And particularly that was a crossbencher bill, the kind of the effort and coordination and willingness to hold hands across the aisle to get something like that through, just repealed with never, I believe, a justifiable explanation for doing so. And remember that got through the Senate because they made that secret deal with Jackie Lambie, and she still to this day won't say what it is. To me, that was a real casting of the veil across some of the important elements of transparency and accountability in Parliament. This was a very important independent Senate crossbenchers openly saying, I can't tell you what it is that I agreed with the government in order to vote for them, but I have an agreement with them and I'm going to keep it a secret. That was horrifying on its own, let alone on the particular bill that they chose to do it on. There are so many moments in 2020. For me, the death of RBG was a big one, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I mean, I know she means a lot to lots of people in the Labor movement, and particularly women. But that happening when it did really set the stakes for the US election that was only a couple of months away at that time. And her dying wish was for the new president and the new Congress and Senate to replace her. And of course, they just bulldozed straight over the top. So I think that really set the stakes for the US election if they weren't already high enough. But also, I think for me, that was a defining moment because I was about 86 weeks pregnant at that point. And we'd been, I was with my husband and daughter, and we'd been to the gym, and then we were getting some breakfast, and just so happened we were in this really high visibility roadside cafe in Lilley, and we were at the most high vis table beside the footpath, beside the high vis road. And Finn, without sort of thinking through the consequences, saw it on Twitter and said to me, "Hey, RBG's just died." And then I burst into tears at the table. And you could see it dawning on his face. Oh God. Oh, what do we? He said, why don't you just get in the car and I will sort the rest of this out. So I was sobbing, piled into the car, and I was, it took a few days, but I know that other people felt sad too, particularly probably people who follow your podcast, Stephen, and I think, if anything, if you try and take away the lessons from things like that, yes, it raised the stakes of the election, but and yes, we did get a Democratic president in the end, but they got Amy Coney Barrett in for 40 years. Mitch McConnell's whole purpose in the Senate has been to get more justices on the Supreme Court, and he has done that. So I don't know, it felt like a one step forward, two steps back moment for us as progressives. In some ways, 2020 has been that, but hopefully come January 2021, things will get better real soon.
Just to pick up on that remark about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that kicked off what was 2 insane weeks in US politics anyway. Like, I remember once those 2 weeks had gone past, I had to remind myself that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away because so much had happened in that time. I think that she passed away maybe 3 days later. The New York Times released those articles about Trump's taxes. He gets coronavirus, I think.
Takes down. Yeah, because you're right, because that was the Amy Coney Barrett swearing in. That was the super spreader event.
Yeah, they rammed through Barrett's process. There must have been something else happened. Maybe aliens came. I don't know. But in that whole period, it was
Russia invaded.
Yeah, it was the longest. And I think other things did happen there that just didn't make the news.
People are shouting at the speakers while we say this. You've forgotten this. You've forgotten this.
Yeah, because and that was 2020. So when I, framed these questions, and I said to you guys, and I'm about to ask you, Josh, in a moment, what is some of the defining moments of 2020? There's not an easy answer in a year that's been packed with so much stuff. Like, I forgot that Kobe Bryant died. That happened a long, long time ago. The bushfires seem a distant memory now, but that was huge. Like, that was massive, massive news. And as you said...
Saturation coverage.
Yeah, Anika, that could have set the tone for the public discourse around climate change. And it just, you're right, it just died. Josh, can you find some moments from 2020 that are defining for you, on top of the press release from Scott Morrison and the Treasurer and the Environment Minister?
You got a haircut after the restrictions lifted, Josh. I think that was a pretty good day, wasn't it?
I did look like Cousin Ip from the Addams Family for a while there in lockdown.
Josh is known as the hair of the Parliament.
I'm not known as the hair of the Parliament.
Yes, you are.
I think that there's, I think the defining moments are the little ones, Stephen, where, especially in Victoria, where you've got to think about what's your hour you're allowed out of the house for the day to go for a walk, or what's, like, whether or not you're a permitted worker to be able to send your child to childcare, and school shutting down. Like, these were the changes. We had a curfew. We lived under a curfew in Victoria. I think these were the defining moments, and they absolutely changed our life in such an intense and quick way. But it also was, I hope we never ever have to do that again. I hope we never ever have to go into lockdown again, ever in my life. But because that's not a natural way. But it also did, people are resilient, and people did adapt, and they did change, and they did, they made the most of their scenario. And but it also was devastating, the way in which witnessing people around you losing their jobs and losing their businesses, and it happened to family, it happened to friends. It was, without getting too gloomy, I think the defining moments for 2020 was that it was the little things that changed, and it was big changes to people's lives, and you don't appreciate some of the way in which we go about our lives until it's taken away. So Yeah, I mean, Kobe passed away. LeBron won the championship, and he's now in the conversation. But the truth is, 2020, I think, for most people, will be a year where they were pushed and a year where they were challenged, and it was a tough year.
Speaking of which, what are some of the things that were classically 2020 that you'll be glad to see the back of or never have to do again, Josh?
Well, in the reverse, so I've had to wear closed shoes around my office now because of people come in here again, which is disappointing. But not the fact that people come in here. It's the fact that I have to wear sociable clothing. But
important clarification there.
Exactly. I don't want the good burgers of socially democratic thinking I don't like people. I just like my feet to be free and easy. Like we're Australians here. But glad to see the back of not being able to see friends and family at home that was pretty crap. Not being able to have people at your house was pretty crap. So I come from a proud Jewish family who if nothing else, we can eat and we cook, and we're pretty good cooks. So not being able to do that and not being able to have Burns family hearty meals, even though it looks like I've probably eaten plenty of Burns family hearty meals, and I'm glad this isn't a visual medium. This is, that's something that I'm glad we don't have to do again.
Anika, what are you glad to see the back of?
Oh, elbow bumps. I hope they are consigned to the dustbin of history as soon as possible. I know we're not through it yet, but they're always awkward. They're always lame. There's always someone who goes for the handshake and then you have to offer the elbow bump, particularly in our line of work. As a woman, it was always tricky navigating the people that would come in for the cheek kiss versus the people that would shake hands. Now you've added the elbow bump. It's a third element. It's too much. So I hope we get rid of that one as quickly as possible. Panic buying.
Hang on a minute. What is your rule with as a public public person in leadership? I forgot. I've lost
I'm an MP.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean.
Public person's fine.
Public person. You know what I mean. Someone's out in public. What's the other word? It's gone. Anyway, let's move on. What are your rules? What's your rules of engagement with the whole, the Seinfeld kiss hello thing? Like, are you just a straight handshake? But then I've met you 3 times. We can progress to
I think what I was talking about is people whom you deal with maybe always through your line of work, like maybe the general manager of the local netball club or something, who likes you, you are friendly with, and they'll come in for the kiss on the cheek. To me, I would just prefer everybody shook hands professionally, and that didn't change if you're a man or a woman. You shouldn't go to kiss the cheek of the woman. It does bother me when if you're in a line of 5 people, for example, there's 4 blokes and you, and they go shake, 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 kiss.
Yeah.
But
I'm with you on that.
I think when in doubt, just shake hands, and we will offer you a kiss on the cheek if we're up for it. Not speaking on behalf of the whole female cohort because I couldn't, but I think when in doubt, just shake. And I was also going to say panic buying. Yeah. That was a 2020 thing that hopefully I don't want to pay $16 for 2 rolls of toilet paper ever again. And Zoom parties, Zoom drinks, that got old fast, didn't it? I think that started off being a real novelty and got old real fast. So I must say, when trying to conceal a pregnancy, a lot easier to do it on Zoom drinks than it is at a bar.
Good point. So it was your friend in some respects.
Yes, it was. It served its purpose, but farewell.
Wholeheartedly agree with all of those sentiments in terms of looking forward to saying goodbye to those things. Although I will stress that I think as we get closer and closer to New Year's Eve, I just want to remind everyone that soon as the bells ding 12 on Hogmanay and all the fireworks go off, coronavirus still is around. Like,
Yes.
2021 doesn't all of a sudden miraculously become, oh, what an amazing year this has been.
Yeah.
We just need
So
to remember
true.
that, okay? So anyway, yes, good to know. Yeah, over Zoom drinks. I tell you what, in Victoria, the second lockdown, no one was doing Zoom drinks. Just don't even bother with it, right?
House party. Yeah.
Yeah, we were just, what's on Netflix? Just, what can I watch on TV? I don't want to leave the couch. Okay, now let's move to a question that is about I forgot that happened this year. What are some of the moments that would have been earth-shattering in any other year, but in 2020 just completely got run over the top of all the big party anthems, so to speak? And I'll start with you, Anika.
Well, I'll start where I mentioned earlier. In February, the sports rorts scandal. I think, in decades past, where government still observed a sense of dignity and honour in their roles and actually resigned, there would have been, we know we got Bridget McKenzie, but she was a sacrificial lamb, I think. That could have consumed the government. I think there's been any number of things, I think, that in times past a government would have gone over, sports rorts being one, the robo-debt being another, which has sort of come to light in past months. Even Josh Frydenberg's $60 billion accounting error. Can you imagine if Wayne Swan had made that error, what News Corp would have said about that? And we would still be talking about it. It would be what they said at the start of every question, every day in the parliament until we lost an election. And yet, gone. I think didn't even make the splash in the Oz, the day after it happened.
I partly put that on the dead shit journos in the federal press gallery. No, you don't. Don't need to draw you guys into this because I know you want to be, all very polite, but I can. They're absolute morons. I don't think they even understood the accounting error, so therefore they didn't write about it. There was probably about one or two journos that did write about it, but otherwise the rest of them were like, "Huh? What are you talking about?" It was that is a huge moment that just got passed over.
Yeah. I think it sunk within 36 hours. It didn't even make the weekend. It was extraordinary. And I know it's disheartening for Labor loyalists out there that this stuff doesn't get more traction. But and I think, like we were talking about before, Morrison knows that, and now they're doing these even more increasingly outrageous things, like giving Matthias Cormann a private jet to jet around Europe. And did you see the analysis? I think it was Annabelle Crabb put it, that he's trying to lobby 34 countries for this position, so they've given him a private jet to do so. Natasha Stott-Despoja also pitched for an OECD job a few months back. She had to lobby 311 countries, something like that, 200 or 300 plus. And she did it from her kitchen table with a laptop. There was no private jets offered to Natasha Stott-Despoja, and she won. Congratulations, Natasha. So I think that this government increasingly does things because they know they're going to get away with it. And it's very frustrating to sit in the parliament or to stand in the parliament and speak about these things and have it feel like you're shouting into the void, even though you are in the federal parliament. So those are frustrating things. More enjoyable things. Malcolm Turnbull's book came out this year. That was that had some real cracker content, and I think in any other year maybe we would have talked about that for a little bit longer than we did. And what a year Gladys has had, hasn't she? Think about the sort of the heroine she became staring down the Nats over the Koala Wars, and then having her own ICAC scandal. But then again, the ferocity of the paces this year means we're not even talking about that anymore. Very serious questions to answer about her role in potential corruption, and gone from the papers within days because there's so much on.
I don't think you're a New South Wales Premier until you've
I've got more, but I'll pause briefly.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think you are a New South Wales Premier until you've been in an ICAC scandal. It just seems to be the de rigueur.
Passage.
Yeah, I think so. Josh, what are the things that have happened for you this year that you had to be reminded that actually happened?
Well, I'm very impressed with Anika's hits of 2020. It was a very good list. And one win that most people would have escaped most people's attention was something that happened even just in this last week, where some of our Northern Territory Labor colleagues have been pushing to to make sure that the Northern Territory doesn't lose a seat in the redistribution up and coming for the next federal election. Now, it may not seem that significant, but at the moment, the Northern Territory has 2 senators per cycle, and only 2 representatives of the House, two House of Reps representatives. So they only have 4, whereas Tassie has 6 because it's officially a state. So it actually is a big deal. And because of the redistribution, the federal government was going to sit idly by as the Northern Territory lost a seat. Now, this was something that Labor members of Parliament have been pushing for. And amazingly, Scott Morrison folded because Barnaby Joyce decided to side with the Labor Party members and basically threatened to cross the floor. And so the government was forced into an embarrassing back down after they lost a vote in the House of Representatives. And they've now introduced their own bill after Michael McCormack, the Deputy Prime Minister and Leader of the Nationals, was forced to support it. This was a great example of standing up to a government who, if they thought they could get away with it, they would have. And now there's going to remain 151 seats, which is 1 more than is legislated, so that the House of Representatives will stay bigger than it's meant to. There won't be a seat lost in the Northern Territory, thanks to the efforts of some Labor members of Parliament. So I thought and no one's talking about. So I think that's a good
one.
Yeah, it's a good story of there are some fractures in this government, and some Labor MPs took it up to Morrison and won, which is pretty good.
The next thing I want to talk to you guys about, I'll censor myself because this is a PG podcast, is the "Are you kidding me" moment of 2020, particularly in federal politics. And I will say this, as a Victorian that's been in hibernation for the better part of 6 months, I've really not seen a lot of federal politics. And I'm sure there are plenty of moments that have happened this year in Parliament where you two have looked at each other and said, "Are you kidding me?" So
yes.
What are Anika, what are some of those moments this year that jump out at you?
My runner-up is when Senator Jarrod Renick, who is my patron senator from the magnificent nation of Queensland, used the Senate to talk about his credentials in childcare policy and said, Dorothy didn't tap her shoes together and say, "There's no place like childcare." Dorothy said, "There's no place like home," chastising everybody who uses childcare across the nation. It was one of those ones where I remember that I was in the reps chamber at the time, and my staff had texted me, "Jarrod Renick just said this," and I said no. I didn't actually believe her. That was extraordinary. But my winner, which was an incredible moment in the Parliament, happened during question time. And it was when a fellow class of 2019, an excellent person, Alicia Payne, member for Canberra, asked the Prime Minister on behalf of women in Yass and the Goulburn Valley, I think, who had, there'd been increasing numbers of women in Yass who were travelling. They've got to drive an hour down the freeway to get to the Canberra or Goulburn hospitals. And there'd been a spate of women who'd had to give birth on the side of the highway, I think including the mayor. So she asked the Prime Minister, "Is that acceptable?" And the Prime Minister said, "Well, that is why we are giving $150 million to upgrade the Barton Highway." Like, we would all sort of sit back and go, "Praise be, Prime Minister, nothing but the freshest bitumen for you to give birth to your babies on." And when he said it, there was just this absolute sort of shout of laughter from our side. And I actually cried tears of laughter. It was so funny. And you could sort of see the dawning horror in his eyes, but also like his chin started to jut out because he's such an obstinate person. the defensiveness. So he tried to bluster through it, but even I saw the Deputy Prime Minister for a meeting later that afternoon, and even he was chuckling away at how ridiculous that answer was, that upgrading a highway was a cure-all for people having to give birth on the side of the highway rather than just giving them a hospital upgrade that would allow women to give birth near their homes. So that, for me, that was number one.
That is outrageous. Joshua.
The app. The app. This mother of an app. Greg Hunt. This guy has more front than Maya to complain about Victoria's contact tracing system when these people spent $70 million on a piece of technology that Scott Morrison literally did like 4 press conferences in a row because they had this target. You may remember, they had this target about like how many people they needed to be able to download in order for it to be safe. And all the tech companies were like, just turn it down a bit because this thing's not going to work. I remember Tim Watts, who was our sort of cyber guru in the caucus, is like, this thing is not going to work.
That's true.
Going to work. And Morrison's going out there being like, the lockdown's going to end, and this is our ticket out of lockdown. Our ticket out.
You're welcome, Australia.
I've done it. I am the master. I have solved our problems. And this was in April or whatever. Anyway, everyone was like, I don't know. I guess we should download the app. And all of the Labor MPs are like, all right, we'll download the app. We've got to try. And this thing has been one of the most expensive mistakes of 2020. But the thing that I like I can, there has been mistakes across all levels of administration throughout this year. Like, we accept that. I accept that.
2020 mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Have been made.
I've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. But the thing that gives me the irks, the thing that really grinds my gears, is the fact that these people who were responsible for the app have now tried to say that other people who have actually done the contact tracing have failed. It is so galling and hypocritical and ironic. It just sums up these characters about what they think they can get away with. It is an appalling failure of public governance and administration, and it is an appalling failure of politics. But it is also it is a reflection of the character of these people, and they can. I just still can't believe they did it, and they deserve condemnation.
When they did all those media press conferences about the app, I was like, Team Australia, all right, fair enough. I don't agree with your politics, but this seems like a good idea. We should all do this. If it's going to work, I trust you, blah, 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 blah. And I downloaded the app and I've left it on and, whatever.
I've still got it on.
I got a new phone this week and I transferred everything over to the new phone and I was doing a bit of a cleanup of all of my apps. I was like, I don't need half these apps. Like Amtrak, really? I mean, when am I going to go back to America again? So delete, right? And then I got to the coronavirus app and I went, no, you're going. So I deleted it. What's the point? It's not doing anything. It's caught like 3 people.
Apparently they're starting again. They literally announced this week they're going to try and start again. But honestly.
Just pathetic. All right. Very good. That's a good one, Josh. I like that. All right. Now let's turn it up a bit. Let's talk about things that we're proud about. This is the proud to be Labor moment of 2020. Anika, what have you got?
Albo's budget reply speech, where we announced our childcare policy, which was a big spend and took a lot of effort. Full credit to Amanda Richworth, who is the Shadow Minister responsible for childcare, who worked night and day convincing everybody that this was the right thing to do. And I think what I'm particularly proud of is how we have, and Albo has been number one on this, shifted the discussion of childcare policy from being a women's issue and something that is nice for middle-class women to have as they go back to their jobs. It went from, we were able to shift the narrative from childcare being something that is nice for middle-class women to have to allow them to return to work, to a serious question of economic productivity. And that is what it is. the more women can participate in the workforce, the better our economy is. And the number one way we can help every element of that is to provide, should be free universal childcare. If we can't do that, heavily subsidised universal childcare in order to get more women back into the workforce to contribute to our economy. That is what they want to do. And I was really, really proud when we stood up and made that the first significant prong of our election platform for next year.
Here. And it's really been hard I mean, this is an outsider's perspective, but I think it's just tough work being an opposition right now in this coronavirus and to get clear air to talk about where you would like to see this country go. And that budget reply was one of the first good opportunities for Albo in his new leadership, really, since, I mean, he's only been leader since the election in mid-2019, to get up and go, right, this is Labor's vision. And I thought it was a fantastic speech, and I'm really glad you pointed out that particular part of the keynote address around childcare. It was, a very proud to be Labor moment for all of us, and for Australians as well. Josh, what's your proud to be Labor moment?
We've spoken about this before, Stephen, and I would echo Anika's response, but the coronavirus has highlighted, I think, the need and the importance of our houses, our homes. We've literally been instructed to stay in our homes throughout this pandemic, and also because of the economic downturn, it has also set up this circumstances by which housing isn't just about the sort of social benefit, it's also about a chance to rebuild the economy. And throughout history, housing has been a real key policy to help rebuild and regrow an economy. So all of the sort of pillars of housing have aligned, and federally we have been constantly talking about the importance of investing in social housing. Even Paul Keating, when asked what can we do to regrow the economy, his response was build public housing until the cows come home. But the moment to be proud, I think, so federal Labor has done really good work here, but the moment to be proud for me especially was the announcement that the Victorian Labor government did a couple of weeks ago, where they announced over $5 billion for social housing. And it, for too long, housing has been put in the too hard basket, but this year, the Victorian Labor government showed the federal government how to tackle a downturn in recession, how to actually use this opportunity to rethink about what's important, what sort of society do we want to live in, but also how are we going to get ourselves out of the economic downturn. And housing is so important. The coronavirus has shown and reminded us how important housing is. We are reminded of the power of government. The city of Melbourne had a plan to end homelessness over 10 years, and they did it in 2 days throughout this pandemic, because it was an expensive solution, but they gave everyone a safe place to live. Our homes are important. Having a safe place to live is important, but governments have not chosen to invest. So for me, this is the year where housing became a priority again, especially for the Labor Party, and that's something that I will continue to push for and continue to talk about throughout my time in politics. And hopefully, when we get in government, we will hopefully be able to deliver reform. And I'll leave you with this one thing, right? This is something that the Liberals try and argue about this in this sort of ridiculous way. When I was working for the Victorian government, Tony Abbott was the Prime Minister, and he had this thing, right? He wouldn't invest the federal government in rail. He just wouldn't, right? It would only invest in roads. It was this crazy Abbott-Credlin hookup that he wouldn't, whether he thought, his people don't vote for trains, so that he only wants to build roads. So he would only put huge amounts of federal government in roads. Anyway, when Turnbull took over the prime ministership, Turnbull's like, well, of course the federal government can invest in rail. We'll put some money into rail investments in Victoria. It's the same thing with social housing. Michael Sukkar, who's the housing minister, who's had a big year, has basically said social housing is the responsibility of the states. Bull crap. It's not. It's a choice by the federal government. It's the same as this Abbott's false dichotomy around rail and roads. They're making a choice not to invest in social housing and not to invest in the sort of economic reform that our country needs. And it's a choice, and we should keep fighting it.
We had a number of elections this year, both here in Australia and overseas. What positives can you take from those campaigns as Social Democrats that you'd want to take into 2021? Because there is a chance that we may have a federal election next year.
Sure is.
And what are some of those warning signs from those campaigns as well? Anika, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, we won them, so congratulations, everyone. Great job. Great job, progressives. They were all won by progressive parties, and that means that we will continue to have progressive governments deliver progressive policy for Australians and progressives abroad, and that is an excellent, excellent thing that we should be grateful for. I also think, just to stop and give a bit of credit to Jacinda Ardern, I know you mentioned her earlier, Stephen, but what a first term to have. The things that she's had to preside over as Prime Minister of New Zealand, like you say, any one of them would be career defining, but she had 3 or 4. And as as a woman in her 30s, she had a child in office. So people like me, I think, look up to her, see what she does. And, at one moment, there was a very clear divide between, Josh was talking about the strong men of global politics. There was one moment during the coronavirus response, sort of relatively early on, where Jacinda Ardern, Angela Merkel, they were all shutting down and acting very quickly and sparking sort of harsh criticism about, hysterical women overreacting. They were right. They were right. And their nations are much better off now for it. So I think a tribute to the progressives, and particularly the progressive women like Anastasia Palaszczuk, who have done great things this year. And, lessons we can take is we should elect more of them.
Joshua, any things you'd want to take from the most recent round of elections we had this year into next year?
I think Anika's spot on, and the one thing I would add to Anika's answer is that Anastasia Palaszczuk has won. She's now the most winning leader of a state government by a woman, and she's won 3 elections. And it shouldn't be a milestone that we think is remarkable because of she's a woman, but she is the first to do it, and she will rightly take her place in history as a Labor leader who set that and who achieved that. And I think that's worthy of pointing out that she was elected as the leader of a party. I think there were 7. Anika, there 7 seats in Queensland after Newman.
When she became opposition leader, 7.
Yeah, 7, and she dragged Labor into a winning position after 1 against the all-conquering Campbell Newman, and then has won 3 elections now. So that is in itself, she will go down to the Labor giant, and rightly so. But I also think that it's she also defies this idea that the Labor brand can't be good in Queensland, and that we can't win in these places where we haven't. I think that that Anastasia Palaszczuk came with strong renewable energy policy. She came with strong policy to look after the environment compared to the federal government. But she also focused on the issues that people really respect and rely on Labor, and that's on our health and on our education and on our on managing the economy and managing people's safety. And we can compete in areas, despite what some of those in the media say, with strong and good policy, with a resolute focus on the people that we represent, and not talking about ourselves. I think the Liberal National Party, especially in Queensland, were riddled with division and riddled with internals that were undermining Deb Frecklington. And at the same time, Queensland looked at that and then contrasted with Labor, who were getting on with dealing with the pandemic and getting on with managing the economy and outlining some of the economic recovery. And people were like, well, those people don't have their, excuse my French, don't have their shit together. And Labor is actually the one who is acting like the adults in the room. So it's a good reminder that we can't be resolute, we can't be focused on ourselves. We have to be focused about the people we represent. And if we do that, we can win places like Queensland, we can win WA, we can win in all of, we have Labor premiers in both of those places. And even though we didn't do very well in the federal election last year, there is hope. There are Labor votes out there. We need to earn those votes, and that's up to us.
And to your point about Queensland Labor, WA Labor are proving that point as well, and they've got an election next year, and Mark McGowan looks like he's going to shit it in, not wanting to put the mods on him, but things are going well for WA Labor as well at a state level, so it does prove that we can have success there at a federal level as well. Let's move on to the final part of the podcast, which is what I'm calling the Dunn Street Awards, and I've got 3 awards here: International Social Democrat of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and MVLP of the Year. So the International Social Democrat of the Year is who has lived up to the vows of being a true social democrat on the international stage. The Rookie of the Year is who would you nominate as a fellow caucus member amongst the class of 2019 that has been a brilliant colleague, a fantastic local MP, and just an all-round star performer. And the MVLP of the Year is the most valuable Labor person of the year. It can be anyone. It can be your local member in your local branch, or it can be someone in the caucus, or, Josh, you can be yourself if you like. I know. So let's, this is going to be a test.
We know
for you,
you're
Josh.
thinking it.
Which one? For all of them, or?
Yeah. Is there a cap?
Yeah.
How many times can we nominate?
Indeed. Well, who wants to go first with International Social Democrat of the Year? Josh, do you want to kick
I will.
it? Oh, go Anika. Sorry, yes. I don't know why I offered and then took away that choice. That was silly of me. That wasn't giving agency, as they say. Anika, please.
So for me, I am giving this to, it might be someone unexpected, but I'm giving it to Stacey Abrams, because she, very nearly became governor of Georgia. Still, you can argue that she should have been the governor of Georgia. Very contentious election, that one. And instead of complaining, instead of quitting, instead of going and taking some high wages job somewhere that I'm sure she had offers, she doubled down, worked even harder, built power for progressives in the state of Georgia, and was the key factor in flipping the state of Georgia to vote for Joe Biden. And now we're facing Senate runoffs. So I would say she is one woman who has triggered international consequences through just being an absolute bloody Labor legend.
She really has, and lives up to the values of don't agonise, organise as well, which I love. Good nomination. Josh, who have you got?
Well, that is a fantastic nomination by Anika. But I think that...
Nominate yourself now, go on.
No, well, I mean, I'm not international, so I can't qualify. People,
haven't you met the Israeli Prime Minister?
people have underestimated Joe Biden his whole life, right? This guy had a stutter growing up. He was a senator from way back. He's run for president a number of times. He's gotten beaten 3 times. He ran for president. He was a loyal understudy to the history-making run of Barack Obama, and people basically had written off his campaign in the lead up to the White House, and then Super Saturday obviously, catapulted him into the prime position of the Democratic primary. Joe Biden has had more votes for him than any other US presidential candidate ever in the history of US elections, and he's defeated a one-term Trump presidency in a year where no one thought that he was even going to get the primary vote. That this guy has found a way. He was disciplined. His team ran an almighty campaign, and they were focused on winning. And he did. And we shouldn't underestimate that. And we shouldn't. He's 78 years old, for crying out loud, and he came out of retirement because he doesn't need to do this. But I sincerely believe that at his core, he's a pretty good guy, and he cares about his country, and he cares about the things that the world needs right now, and he cares about leadership, and he's defeated Donald Trump. So good on him, and good on Joe, and he gets my nomination. But Stacey Abrams is a great nomination too.
I'm looking forward to the 4 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris memes looking adoringly at each other as they turn America around.
That fireworks display
Yes, that was
really
brilliant.
Healed a lot of hearts, didn't it? I needed that fireworks display.
The little run. That was
the shuffle run.
I know.
We all needed that.
Kamala's speech was that was.
Well, I thought I wondered who you were going to choose. There is actually a decent list of people overseas that you could have chosen. Kamala Harris would be another one. I think it's been remarkable what she's achieved, and obviously Jacinda Ardern as well. Your remarks earlier, Anika, go to that. Okay, let's go to Rookie of the Year, and we're going to go back in reverse order. So, Josh, you can go first this time. Who is your Rookie of the Year?
Well, there's a few, and I'm very fond of many of my colleagues. I think I'm going to go with sort of a this year focused, and that would be Christy McBain. She won a by-election that no one thought she was going to win. She campaigned in really difficult circumstances, and she did it. She earned respect from her community when she turned up to the bushfires when Morrison was overseas. So she and getting to know her a little bit, she's a great person, and she's really humble and really decent. I really like her. So she gave Labor a bit of hope in a pretty dark year. So we're very pleased and proud of Christy.
Anika.
Good one. I really struggled to nominate just one here. We have a great class of 2019. So I have split my winners among Kate Thwaites and Peter Murphy, both of whom are women, both of whom are from the great state of Victoria. So both of whom worked as the federal MP for their electorate out of lockdown for over 100 days this year. Peter Murphy is fighting breast cancer for the second time, and you wouldn't know it if you ever dealt with her on a day-to-day basis. She never complains. She never uses it as an excuse. Sometimes we'll finish a long day in Parliament and we're off to dinner, and she says, I might just need to go home and rest. And that's the only thing she ever gives away, that she's got more going on than other people by way of extra hurdles to jump, and Kate Thwaites is having her second baby. Being pregnant in lockdown is no joke. A lot of the services that you sort of think of as part and parcel are not available. And both of these women are excellent friends. Kate Thwaites is also pregnant with her second baby. Being pregnant in lockdown is no joke. A lot of the services that you need to access or would like to access are not available. So doing that among everything else that is involved in being a federal MP, being mother to a toddler, is very difficult. And I also nominate Kate and Peter because they are absolute agile media performers. Kate Thwaites taking down Julian Simmons on the ABC this year was an absolute highlight for me. And Peter Murphy does God's work for Labor people, rebutting Tim Wilson on Sky every Friday. I think she's up. So I nominate those two for my joint Rookies of the Year.
Wouldn't wish. Well, go on Sky News. I just that in itself, I think, elevates you into a stratosphere that I respect greatly. Very good nominations from both of you there. Let's go to the last one. The MVLP of the year, the most valuable Labor person of the year. Anika Wells, take it away.
So I think this year, like I said, was a year that reinforced the power, importance and truth of Labor principles. And one of those is our strength in grassroots organising. This year, if you were a federal MP, it was more important than ever that you knew every street and lane of your electorate and who would be most in need of help, which services would do that help or which services you need to help resources as the federal member. So this is a year that really suited people who are in Parliament to do that work. And I pay tribute to all of those people out there who did that both in and outside the Parliament. But on the basis that this was a year where we needed that more than ever and we should honour that more than ever, I'm giving MVLP to Mike Freelander, who is one of our federal colleagues. Mike is or Dr. Mike Freelander, I should say. He was a paediatrician, so he didn't need to come to federal politics for the glamour and the salary. He came because he wanted to do good things. And he's one of those people that you won't see him on Sky, but he is the glue that holds the caucus together. People like Mike, he will always check on you. I know that there's been 6 pregnant Labor MPs this year, and he wanders the aisles in question time to make sure that we're all doing all right and ask how the babies are going. You also might have seen that our whip Chris Hayes ran into some trouble in the Federation Chamber a few weeks back in the Parliament and had to go to hospital, and Mike was in the chair when it happened, and Chris called out to Mike knowing that he would run in to rescue him, and Mike did some excellent work. You want to be in the room with Mike if anything goes wrong. So both for him being just a truly excellent bloke, a fantastic colleague, and a grassroots MP in the true spirit of Labor ideals, I give MVLP to Mike Freelander.
Hey, nice work. Josh?
That is a very good nomination. I'm not sure I can top it, but I in Victoria, we have been working from home, and MPs were allowed to come into their office, especially during sitting weeks where we had to zoom into Parliament via this blue cable that has the secure parliamentary internet line, which happens to be on Turnbull's NBN, so it's a bit patchy, but it's at least meant to have some security around it. But for all of our staff, they were at home, and especially in Victoria, they were at home. So my MVLP goes to the Labor staffers who, throughout this pandemic, have been at home, who have been isolated, and who have still picked up the phone to constituents, and who have still helped draft responses and deal with immigration issues and deal with visa issues, and most importantly, deal with Centrelink issues, because there have been literally, people have been inundated with Centrelink, or officers have been inundated with Centrelink inquiries because thousands and thousands of Australians have, for the first time in their lives, had to engage with a system that they never ever had to, and through no fault of their own have had to engage in a system that they never ever have to. So my MVP of this year is to all of the staff members who have had to go through this pandemic as much as anyone else, but have been at home and have answered calls and who have done their work in difficult circumstances to try and help people and help our community in the spirit in which Anika was describing before. So I say, to my staff and to all of the other staff out there who have done their job and not made it about them, but really made it about the people that we seek to represent, that well done, you deserve the MVLP this year.
Hear, hear. Well done, guys. Thank you very much for not just your time on today's podcast, but also your support of Socially Democratic since day one. I've both enjoyed having you on the podcast over the time that we've been doing this in the last 2 years, I think. And it's great to have you back on again, and it's great to see you both doing excellent work representing Labor, both not only in your constituencies, but also in Canberra as well. And it's I wish you both the best of luck going into 2021 and potentially an election year. You're both in marginal seats. You both had tough fights to get there. I think you've done a great job over the course of the last 16 months, and you'll continue to do so. And I hope you both get a good break with your families over the Christmas, Hanukkah period and New Year. So best of luck, guys.
Yeah, such a delight. Hopefully the next time we record this, we can all be in the one room.
Maybe
Wouldn't that be nice? Imagine.
A little tipple during and see where this podcast takes us.
Those babies are out now. Let's get back on the wagon.
I'm down with that, but Josh will need to lie down after a couple of scotches. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, mate.